Hey guys, welcome back to NFL Trading Room. Today we've got another fun video for you. We're going to be going through a mid-season NFL mock draft for the 2026 NFL Draft. Halfway through the college football season so far, so got a couple games in on some of these prospects, and I did a preseason mock before the season started, and things have changed quite a bit, as you would assume, coming from summer scouting. A lot of player movement, a lot of team movement as well. As an additional point, this mock is before I believe we're in week 8 of college football. So it's pre-week 8. So if anything crazy happens in week 8 or week 7 of the NFL, even, then that would be why this mock draft may be a little bit different than some might expect. But let's go ahead and dive right in. With the first pick, the New York Jets are on the board, and they need a quarterback. That is pretty obvious at this point with how Justin Fields has played to this point. And quarterback has kind of been a little all over the place so far this draft cycle. But I think, at least on my board, Fernando Mendoza out of Indiana is the choice here. Just a guy that's 6'5", 225, has a strong arm, understands the game really well, sees the field, gets the ball out quickly, is accurate to all three levels of the field. I think he's the prototypical pocket passer. If you can win from the pocket, you can win the NFL, and he can absolutely win from the pocket. So with the Jets having a good offensive line already built up and a true wide receiver one in Garrett Wilson, I think it's the time to bring in the franchise quarterback. But next up, the Cleveland Browns at second overall. Again, we're going back to quarterback here. Just things I don't trust Dylan Gabriel or Shadur Sanders long term, and obviously they didn't trust Joe Flacco because they traded him away. Now that wasn't something to look at long term with Joe Flacco, but that was just another testament to how dysfunctional that quarterback room is right now. And I think even with the third round pick that they invested in Dylan Gabriel, I think they would easily draft a quarterback in the first round, especially if they're at this selection right here. And I think the choice here for me would be Dante Moore out of Oregon. Still a guy that's really, really inexperienced. He's a redshirt sophomore, played at UCLA his true freshman season, and then I believe he started 5 games and then transferred to Oregon to sit behind Dylan Gabriel for a year to redshirt and continue to grow, continue to learn. The Indiana game was probably the first game of the season where it didn't look like he was seeing the field very well. It looked like Indiana's defense confused him a little bit with some coverages, but still really impressed with what he's done so far, especially with the inexperience that he has. Just sees the field really well. I think he's more athletic than some give him credit for. He's not some super athlete, but I think he's definitely an above average athlete for the position. Really good arm, accurate, processes the field well. And Oregon actually, I think, does a lot or puts a lot on his plate. I think they actually put more on his plate than they did on Dylan Gabriel. It was a lot of RPO stuff with Dylan Gabriel last year, and they still run some of that with Dante Moore, but I think it's more of a traditional passing game with Moore. So you kind of get a quarterback reunion here with Dante Moore and Dylan Gabriel. Now, maybe the biggest surprise as far as draft position here is the Baltimore Ravens at third overall. And they need help really all over the place, especially on defense. And I'm just going to go ahead and take probably the best edge rusher in the class, and that is Ruben Bain out of Miami. Ruben Bain is kind of an interesting player at 6'3", 275 pounds, probably not your traditional edge one that you would see in most classes. And he doesn't seem to have the longest arms, which may be a concern for some, but it's not for me. He is explosive. He is probably the most powerful edge rusher I've seen in quite a while. The bull rush is absolutely dominant. It seems like he puts an offensive tackle on his back every single game at this rate. He's really flexible, honestly, at his size, even at 275 pounds, and he works his butt off against the run as well. So really just a complete player that's a great athlete for his size, and I think has the potential to just continue to grow. He's been healthy this season. He wasn't healthy last year, and I think you're seeing why he was that 5-star coming out of high school and why he's going to be probably a top 5 pick in this class. Next up with the Miami Dolphins, you're probably going to have a completely new front office, coaching staff, what have you with the Miami Dolphins. Everything has gone downhill there, and they've got a lot of money tied up in some expensive aging players that haven't necessarily played well, and they just need an infusion of talent. And I think probably the best way to go here would probably be Clemson's Peter Woods, the defensive tackle. Peter Woods, while Clemson has been really disappointing this year as a team, Peter Woods has not been disappointing. He's still been his same Peter Woods self. Just really explosive I believe he's listed at 6'3", 310 pounds. Still want a little bit more as a pass rusher, but you still see that really high end flashes. He sets the tone against the run. He's a really strong player, understands how to take on double teams well, anchors well, plays with great leverage, just does everything you would want in a defensive tackle. I know they did draft Kenneth Grant in the first round last year, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, but Kenneth Grant has not played well so far, and really none of that Miami defense has played very well. So I think just going in what some people would say is the best player on the board at this point in the draft would be the right move for Miami. Just get some young talent in the building. Next up with the New Orleans Saints, I'm going to go back to the defensive line here and take edge rusher out of Auburn, Keldrick Falk. You look at the Saints edge room, you've got Cameron Jordan, who is on the brink of retirement, maybe a Hall of Fame level career. I would consider it so, but he is getting up there in age, and the productivity has gone down each season for the last couple of years. They've got Carl Granderson, who they extended recently. He's a fine player, gets a lot of pressure, totals up the sacks, but not probably a guy that you want to be your number one edge. And the rest of that edge room, outside of maybe Chase Young, isn't really too enticing. So Keldrick Falk has really impressed me this year. I thought he was a better run defender last year than he has been this year, and I was kind of critical in the summer of his pass rushing skills. I thought he was a really good athlete, but didn't really know what he was doing rushing the passer. Just tried to win with his athleticism. And while he still tries to do that, he is still a bit raw as a pass rusher. There's a lot more to his game this year than there was last year, and I think betting on that growth and the athleticism at his listed 6'6", I don't think he's 285 pounds like what he's listed at. I'd say he's probably more in that 260, 265 range, but still moves exceptionally well, has the length, has the power, has the flexibility around the corner. I think he really provides everything that you could want, and it would be a really big time swing for the Saints in this top five. Next up with the Tennessee Titans, Cam Ward needs weapons. Cam Ward hasn't been perfect this year at all, but there's not a lot of help around him. Calvin Ridley hasn't played well, and he's got a hamstring injury currently, which you never want to see for an aging receiver. And then the rest of that receiver room is Alec Eilmanor, who is a 2025 fourth-round pick, and Chimere Dike, who was a 2025 fourth-round pick. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot in that receiver room, which is why I'm going to go with Arizona State's Jordan Tyson. You could argue for maybe a couple different positions here. Certainly edge rusher would be at the top of the board. And if Ruben Bain was still on the board, I might lean him over Jordan Tyson. But Jordan Tyson just flat out the best receiver in this class, and that's no slight to the rest of this receiver class, because it is a really good receiver class, and it's developed a lot throughout the season. But Jordan Tyson has always been wide receiver one. He's been the consensus wide receiver one. He was my wide receiver one. 6'2", 195 pounds, that traditional X receiver, but really could play all over the formation. Can come in motion. You can get him touches in the screen game on jet sweeps. You can throw it downfield to him as a deep threat. He can run every route in the book. He's great after the catch. He's really improved his drop rate as well this year. It was around 8% last year. It's way down to, I believe, 2%. And he's just a monster after the catch. He really does all you could want in a blue chip receiver. And this will definitely be a welcome sight for Cam Ward and the rest of the Titans organization. Next up at 7th overall, we've got the Cincinnati Bengals, and objective number one is to protect Joe Burrow. And so we're going to take who I think is the best offensive lineman on the board here, possibly, and that is Spencer Fano out of Utah. He hasn't been necessarily as dominant as I expected him to be so far this season. I still think he needs to put on at least 10 pounds before he steps onto an NFL field, at least expecting him to play well. He's listed at 6'6", 302, but I would probably say he's probably in that 290-pound range. But just an exceptional athlete. He moves like a tight end. I do think he probably lacks the length that you would want from a tackle. I think he could certainly be a good tackle, But I think the reason that you could do this if you're the Bengals, you have Orlando Brown at left tackle, who if they choose to extend, you could keep at left tackle. You've got Amarius Mims, who was a first round pick a couple years ago at right tackle. So you could have Spencer Fano replace Orlando Brown and move Amarius Mims over to left tackle, or you could move Spencer Fano to the interior, which I think would be another good option. I'm intrigued to see at the Senior Bowl once he declares if he takes any reps at guard or maybe even center with the lack of length that I think he has. Um, but just an all around great player, exceptional athlete, good in pass and run blocking. Um, Really, his run blocking is the calling card. He's a very tenacious blocker, likes to finish his blocks with authority, and I really like that out of offensive linemen. I think this would be a really, really good pick for the Bengals. Again, objective number one is protect Joe Burrow. Next up at eighth with the Las Vegas Raiders, I'm going to go quarterback here. This has been another surprise so far this season. It's going to be Ty Simpson out of Alabama. Um, Ty Simpson started off the season a bit rough, as did the rest of Alabama with that loss to Florida State, but they have been on an absolute roll as of recently. And Ty Simpson's been the catalyst of that. He's been very cerebral ever since that Florida State game. He's taken on a lot of that leadership role and really turned that season around for Alabama. Um, Maybe his calling card that I would say is he's so willing to throw over the middle of the field, which you see a lot of college quarterbacks shy away from because a lot of offensive coordinators at the college level want to keep it outside the numbers. They don't want interceptable passes being thrown over the middle where there's a lot of defensive congestion. But Ty Simpson has no fear going over the middle of the field. The ball gets out quick. He's got a strong arm. He's accurate. He's not going to be a guy that's a runner per se, but he's mobile enough to move around in the pocket and extend plays. And just a guy that sees the field exceptionally well for the experience that he has. I believe he's going into his seventh start in his collegiate career. So still a really young quarterback, even though he's in his fourth season in college. Waited around at Alabama, waited his turn, and it's proved to be the right decision so far. And I think this would be a great pick for the Raiders. With Geno Smith, I believe they signed him to a 2-year extension before this season. So next year would be his last season on that deal, and he has not played well. But the rest of that offense has not helped him much at all, especially that offensive line. It's been pretty pathetic, honestly. But Ty Simpson, if you can get him to come in, sit a year behind Geno Smith, I think that would be ideal, considering the 1 year starting if he does declare, which I think he will. Um, and sit behind Geno for a year, I think that would be the perfect situation for the Raiders, and they get their franchise quarterback that they've been searching for. Next up with the New York Giants, you've got a couple of fun rookies with Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo that have been a lot of fun for Giants fans to watch this year. And we're going to take somebody to help keep them as healthy as possible, even though they are both some risky ball carriers. We're going to take Olai Vavenga Iwane, if I'm pronouncing that right. I believe that's how you pronounce it, the left guard out of Penn State. Iwane is probably my favorite player in this class, especially coming out of summer scouting. There was no player that I was more blown away with once I got into his film compared to the consensus. The consensus board had him in the 150s overall. I had him top 10 coming out of summer scouting. I believe I picked him relatively high in the preseason mock as well. I believe it was to the Miami Dolphins in the top 15. But just a really powerful player, 6'4", 330 pounds. Pretty athletic, honestly, at his size. Something Penn State did a lot of last year was they would line him up as this flexed out slot receiver, bring him in motion like he's a split zone blocker as a tight end and come across the formation. And just speaks to his athleticism at that size. But just really powerful hands. The grip strength is great. There was no one that I saw with more pancakes on their tape than Iwane. And I think he's continued that dominance in 2025, even though Penn State's been really, really disappointing so far this season. But really excited to see him at the next level. You plug him into that offensive line, and Cam Skattebo is going to have more room to run. Jackson Dart's going to have more time to throw. I think Iwane, benefits both the pass and the run game. I think he's proficient in both, and would just be a great pick for the Giants moving forward. Next up at 10th, rounding out the top 10, definitely a contender for my favorite player in this class, and he's been another surprise so far this season. It is Arvell Reese the linebacker slash edge rusher out of Ohio State. Cardinals, I think, just have to go best player available here. Arvell Reese is a top three player in this draft to me. 6'4", 243 pounds. He can move. He's athletic. But I honestly think that he would be best served converting to edge full time. It's not that I hate his linebacker tape, but he's not exactly the best in zone coverage. Um, he's improving at it. He's definitely gotten better as the season has gone on. But he's definitely a run defense first type of linebacker. But man, when he gets out on the edge and he rushes the passer, it looks like a first round edge rusher pretty easily. There was a rep against Illinois that went around Twitter and that I certainly took note of, where he just forklifted an Illinois offensive tackle on his way to the quarterback. Um, just explosive athlete, really powerful hands, maybe the strongest player pound for pound in this class, and just all around just an absolute football player. He's the definition of a football player. He can do it all, and something that the Cardinals did draft Zaven Collins, who is a kind of in a similar mold coming out of Tulsa, almost a half decade ago. I think Arvell Reese is just Zaven Collins on the 200th percentile outcome of what Zaven Collins was supposed to be. I think Arvell Reese can be that. Could play a little bit of linebacker, could play a little bit of edge. I think you would be best served to find him, his one true position, and I would hope that would be edge. I think he could be an all-pro caliber edge one day, and that would certainly help the Cardinals. Next up at 11th with the Houston Texans, it's kind of a similar conversation to Joe Burrow and the Bengals. You got to protect C.J. Stroud. They kind of baffled me when they took two receivers high in last year's draft, this past draft in 2025. You already had Nico Collins. You had to have a couple other talented receivers. I get you got to keep infusing youth into that receiver room, but with the trade of Laramie Tunsil preseason and with just the barren wasteland that is that Texans offensive line, I just didn't really understand not taking an offensive lineman with any of those picks. But they're going to take one here. And to me, the best one left on the board, it's still a bit of a projection for me, but it is Trevor Goosby, the offensive tackle out of Texas. It's certainly not perfect, but when it's right, it's right. He's 6'7", 312 pounds. He's got long arms. Don't think he's athletic as I thought he was coming out of summer, but he's still an athletic tackle. Um, and I think when the technique is right, it looks really pretty. There's still some times where he loses the corner to some more bendier rushers. There's some times where he's not necessarily prepared for an inside counter, but he's still a very young football player. He's a redshirt sophomore. He filled in for Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams both when they got injured down the stretch for Texas last year and played very well. And while I don't think he's taken the jump that I personally thought he would, I had him mocked first overall in the preseason mock draft, but still a really talented player that I would be perfectly fine with the Texans taking a chance on here. And just, again, you have to protect C.J. Stroud. You could put him at right tackle and slide Tytus Howard inside. I think that would be the most ideal fit for Houston. But I think this would be a really solid pick for the Houston Texans. Next up with the Dallas Cowboys. To me, I would go with the best defensive player on the board once again, and to me that's Caleb Downs, the safety out of Ohio State, another Ohio State defender going in the top 12. Caleb Downs, I think, is the smartest football player I've ever studied, and I've only been doing this a short time, but just the way he reads the field, how many different roles he can play in that Ohio State defense, the checks that you can see him make from the back end of the defense, picking up for other people's coverages. It's like watching a quarterback, but on the defense at deep safety. But he plays in the box. He plays the nickel. He does everything for Ohio State. He even returned punts a little bit last year. He's got great ball skills. People don't throw his way a whole lot, but when they do, he shows off those ball skills. I don't think he's necessarily some electric athlete, but he's a good athlete for the safety position. But he's just always in the right place at the right time. He's a sure tackler, does everything you would want for a safety. And I think this would be a good pick for that back end of the Dallas defense. Both of their safeties haven't played well this year at all. And Donovan Wilson has been a player that's played quite a bit for the Cowboys and hasn't seemed to improve a whole lot throughout his career. Still a fine player, but you could definitely do better, and they will here with Caleb Downs. Next up with the 13th pick, we're going to go with Carolina Panthers, and they're going to take cornerback Mansour Delane out of LSU. Mansour Delane has been another surprise this year. He was a transfer from Virginia Tech in this past portal cycle. There was a lot of hype around Mansour Delane going into last season, and rightfully so. And not that he had a bad 2024, it was just a bit disappointing. He allowed quite a bit of touchdowns. The ball production wasn't necessarily there, and just didn't seem very confident last year. But he has completely flipped that around in 2025. Um, Tentatively, he's my cornerback one because of the Jermod McCoy injury, and we'll talk about Jermod McCoy a little bit later. The cornerback out of Tennessee that's still recovering from that ACL injury. But him and Mansour Delane are gunning for that cornerback one spot, in my opinion. And Mansour Delane, with the health that he has, I think would be the first off the board if the draft were today. Um, but just a guy that's really proficient in man coverage, proficient in zone coverage, great ball skills, really good athlete, has the length to play outside corner, and pairing him with J.C. Horn would create one of the best cornerback duos, if not the best in the entire NFL. But next up, with the 14th overall pick, I wanted to go the fun route with this one, so we're going to take Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq. We all know Travis Kelce is nearing the end of his career. He's 35. He's been regressing pretty substantially the past couple years, definitely on the athleticism side of things. So getting his replacement now would be helpful for Patrick Mahomes. Kenyon Sadiq is a guy that Oregon uses as a vertical threat. They use him in the short game on RPOs. They get him touches on screens, on flat routes. Um, I think that would fit perfectly with the Kansas City offense with how many RPOs they run. And he can also stretch the middle of the field vertically. I think that would be the perfect replacement for Travis Kelce. And while he's not some insanely good blocker for a tight end, he is a good blocker. He's a difference maker in the run game as a blocker. And that is something that the Chiefs have missed with Travis Kelce. We all know he's not a blocker. But Kenyon Sadiq definitely is one, fights his tail off in the run game, and you can tell he cares about it. So I think this would just be the perfect pick for the Chiefs, transitioning that position over to Kenyon Sadiq. Next up at 15th with the Washington Commanders, we're going to take USC wide receiver Mekhi Lemon. To me, Mekhi Lemon is a top 10 player in this class. It was just kind of hard to find a true fit for him here, but I think he fits perfectly with the Commanders. They do have Terry McLaurin on the outside, but he has been a bit injury prone this season so far. Hasn't played a whole lot of games, and Deebo Samuel's not a long-term plan there either. They did draft Jalen Lane, who is a good deep threat out of Virginia Tech this past draft, but I still think it'll be a while before he becomes more of a complete receiver. Mekhi Lemon, to me, outside of Jordan Tyson, is probably the most well-rounded receiver in this class. He is a smaller receiver. I believe he's at about 5'11", 190 pounds. But I don't think he's refined or confined to the slot. I think he could play the Z in most offenses. He's really physical at the catch point, especially for his size. He's got great hands. I think he's the best route runner in this class. Jordan Tyson's close, but I think it is Mekhi Lemon. The way he gets in and out of breaks is something that just is beautiful to watch on tape. And he's a guy that gets after it after the catch, even shows some physicality and some want-to in run blocking, which I love to see from receivers, because if you're going to show effort there, you're going to show effort in other areas of your game as well. But Mekhi Lemon, just one of my favorite players in this entire draft class, and I think this would be the perfect fit, giving Jaden Daniels another weapon to throw to. Next up with the Chicago Bears, they need pass rush pretty bad. They've got Montez Sweat, but outside of that, there's not a whole lot getting to the or getting to the quarterback from the outside. Javon Dexter has been a nice interior pass rusher for them for the past couple years, but I'm going to go David Bailey, the edge rusher out of Texas Tech, transferred over from Stanford in this past portal cycle, part of that big Texas Tech transfer portal class. And David Bailey and a guy we'll talk about later is probably the best edge duo, the most feared in all of college football. David Bailey, I believe, leads the country in sacks and pressures and pass rush win rate, which is just ridiculous. The moves that he busts out, he's not like a power rusher, but when he breaks out a bull rush, it works. But he's got a swim move, he's got a spin move, just a deep bag of moves. I'm not the biggest on having like a 7 different move set. If you have 2 to 3 that you can work off each other, then that's perfect for me. But David Bailey can work all 7 of those really, really well, and works them well off of each other. Offensive tackles typically don't have any clue what move he's going to on most passing downs. And I don't think he's a guy that you're probably going to play early against the run. Um, Hopefully he can bulk up and continue to add strength and be a difference maker at some point in the run game. But you're drafting the guy to get after the quarterback, and he's going to do exactly that. I think he's a guy that I could easily see being a 10 sack a year, 40 to 50 pressure guy in the NFL. And I think this would just be a really solid pick to pair with Montez Sweat as the Bears continue to build that defense. Quick break though in the mock draft. If you guys wouldn't mind just to go down below, drop a like, drop a comment, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That would just let us know you're enjoying the content. We'll continue to bring breakdowns, mock drafts, film reviews to you throughout the rest of the draft season. Let's get back into the mock draft. The Rams are up at pick 17. This is the pick that they got from the Atlanta Falcons from the James Pierce trade this past draft when the Falcons moved up to pick James Pierce at 27th overall, I believe it was. There are a lot of directions that the Rams could go here. You could certainly argue for a quarterback here. I don't think Lenore Sellers is going to declare. And I don't know if I would take any of these other quarterbacks at this spot, especially with how like Garrett Nussmeyer's played in 2025. And I think Matthew Stafford has the biggest to do with that. He's been exceptional this year. He's probably playing the best he ever has at age 37, 38 with, a bad back, some might still say. Just an exceptional football player. Should he be an easy Hall of Famer once he retires and has the 5 years. But the direction I decided to go here was, like we mentioned him earlier, was Jermod McCoy, the cornerback out of Tennessee. Still has not suited up in 2025. Had the ACL tear in a January training session, so he's approaching 9 months since the surgery, which is around the benchmark for ACL tears. But especially at a position like corner, not only does the player have to be healthy, they have to trust the knee. They can't, be hesitant with the knee. You see this a lot of times in, say, Ronald Acuna in baseball, for example. Coming off of both of his ACL tears, you could tell at times he wasn't very comfortable in trusting that knee. But that's going to be way more important at the position of corner with how quickly you have to change direction, accelerate, decelerate. But if you're just going off the 2024 tape, this is a top 5 player in the draft class. Just an exceptional player in all phases. He was a receiver coming into college, so the ball skills are there, and just stays in phase. He's a sticky man coverage player. He's a really, really high IQ player in zone coverage. Had an interception against Jackson Arnold that I think back to, where he's the cloud defender in a cover 2 scheme, and just perfectly baits the quarterback into an interception early in that game. But we'll see if he takes the field in 2025. But even if he doesn't, I would still expect him to be a first-round pick. Derek Stingley a few years ago was a top 5 pick, and he only played 3 games his junior year. And we see how that's turned out. He's become an all-pro corner. But I think Jermod McCoy would definitely be a big boost to that Rams cornerback unit. It's a really good defense. mainly due to that ferocious defensive line that they have. And Chris Shula, their defense coordinator, has done a great job patchworking that defense and making it work with the scheme, but they could certainly use a boost at the cornerback position. Next up with the Vikings at pick 18. Here's where Jeremiah Love is going to come off the board for me, the running back out of Notre Dame. Jeremiah Love is an exceptional football player, the best running back in this draft class, pretty comfortably for me. Um, really showing even more as a receiver this year, which is great. Looked a little bit banged up to start the season, and he's had a couple of injuries, uh, not necessarily major, but just throughout the last couple of years. But overall, he's the most complete running back in this class. He's explosive. He's got maybe the most athletically impressive hurdle you'll see from a running back. He tries it about once a game. I'd be okay if he didn't try that as much because it can be quite the health risk. Um, but looking at that running back room in Minnesota, they do have Jordan Mason under contract for one more year, but he would be off the books in 2026. Aaron Jones is definitely getting up there in age, and I think his body is starting to break down, as you see with a lot of those running backs as they enter their 30s, especially when you've got a guy like Aaron Jones who's had as many carries as he's had throughout his career, not just in the NFL, but in college as well. Um, and I just think Jeremiah Love would be a great addition to that backfield and would obviously take over as the bell cow guy once Jordan Mason goes off of the books. Not going to say he's going to be the next Adrian Peterson or anything because that's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but would be the next great Minnesota running back, in my opinion. But next up with the Buffalo Bills at pick 19, this is where I'm going to have to eat my crow from summer scouting. It's going to be receiver Carnell Tate. I wasn't necessarily a disbeliever in Carnell Tate. I had a third round grade on him coming out of the summer, but I believe I had him as my wide receiver 14 because I was higher on this receiver class than a lot of other people. Um, but Carnell Tate has blown me away this season. Arguably has been wide receiver one on that Ohio State team. Jeremiah Smith has still been fantastic for them, but Carnell Tate has been unbelievable. He's making contested catches at an extremely high rate. The drop rate has gone down. He looks more explosive athletically. He's become a better route runner. The technical aspects of his game have gotten better. He's better after the catch. He's gotten better in pretty much every aspect of his game. Um, I think he's made himself a guaranteed first round pick at this point. And this is exactly what Buffalo needs. They've got Khalil Shakir, which is a really good player, but he's purely a slot receiver. Keon Coleman was a first-round pick 2 years ago that hasn't been the most productive. And there's not a lot else going on in that Buffalo receiver room. And you got to give Josh Allen a wide receiver one, that outside guy that can continue to win against press man coverage, that can run any route in the book. And Carnell Tate can be exactly that for the Bills. Next up at 20th overall, I'm going to have the Denver Broncos going with a fun pick here, and it is going to be Sonny Styles, the linebacker out of Ohio State. Sonny Styles was a safety coming out of high school, so he's converted to linebacker. 6'4", 237 pounds, I believe is what he's listed at. Just an incredible athlete. He's continued to become more physical as he's gotten used to that linebacker position. Really, really smart football player, covers a ton of ground, good in zone coverage, and man, putting him in that Denver scheme where he gets to line up all over the formation. He can blitz, he can drop in coverage, he can play man on a running back or a tight end. I think that'd be a dream fit for Vance Joseph's defense over there. Not that, Alex Singleton or Justin Stronad, I think is how you pronounce his name, have been bad. But Denver doesn't have a whole lot of holes. You could talk about offensive line for sure, but or even receiver to some extent. But this was one where I just wanted to go with a really fun player, kind of a dream scheme fit. I think Sonny Styles would be a Pro Bowl, maybe even all-pro level player in that Denver scheme. Next up with the Cleveland Browns, you got to protect your new franchise quarterback, Dante Moore. This is the pick that they got from the Travis Hunter trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But like I said, you got to protect your franchise guy. Best offensive lineman on the board to me is Francis Mauigoa out of Miami. He's a guy that could play tackle. I think he could. He's probably better at guard at the next level, but I think he could play tackle at the next level. Good athlete. The grip strength is through the roof. If he gets latched on to a defensive lineman, the rep is pretty much over. Um, Still think he loses too much to inside counters coming across his face. But I think he's gotten better in that area since summer scouting. Definitely higher on my board now than he was in summer scouting. Um, but that is one of the reasons that I would move him to guard. Is I don't think he's the best in space, even though he's not a bad athlete. He's a good athlete, um, but really like him on down blocks as well. Good puller, really paces it well. But whether he's a tackler or a guard, Cleveland needs a lot of help on that offensive line. Um, just a couple years ago, they had one of the best offensive lines in football, and it's aged pretty quickly. Joel Bitonio has been a guy that's been an awesome guard for them, but he's definitely nearing the end of his career. Wyatt Teller has been another guy that's been a good guard for them. He's also nearing the end of his career. Um, and they need some young talent on that offensive line for sure. And I think this would be a great pick for the Browns here. Next at 22nd, the Rams are back on the clock, and we're going to go with another offensive lineman here. It's going to be Connor Lew, the center out of Auburn. Um, Connor Lew was a guy that I was really high on coming out of summer scouting. And I had him going in a similar range. I believe it was to the Broncos in the preseason mock draft. Um, Not necessarily as high on him so far this season, even though he's improved in some areas. Still an exceptional athlete, still probably the most accurate blocker at the second level of the defense that I've seen, but still struggles with length at times, still struggles with some more powerful players. But if he adds, 10 pounds, gets up to that 310-pound range, um, I think he's absolutely worthy of this selection. The Rams need some offensive line help for sure, especially if they want to continue to keep Stafford clean in the pocket. And Connor Lew is really good in pass protection, so that would be a really, really good pick to secure the interior of the pocket there for the Rams. Next up, with the Detroit Lions at 23rd. Again, this is the story of this draft so far. It's another surprise player. It's going to be Colton Hood, the other cornerback out of Tennessee. He's actually played this year. He transferred over from Colorado in the spring, and with the not just the injury to Jermod McCoy, but also Ricky Gibson was another draft eligible cornerback that is also out with injury for Tennessee. So Colton Hood was thrusted into that opposite corner starting job and has absolutely ran with it. Um, he's kind of an interesting build for an outside corner. I believe he's listed at 5'11", 190 pounds. And he doesn't look like the longest on tape, but he always just seems to affect the ball in the air, even against bigger receivers, whether it was against Georgia or Mississippi State or against Arkansas. He always seemed to beat the taller receivers to the ball in the air, and just plays with his hair on fire. He's a really good tackler in run support. Um, Again, proficient in both man and zone coverage. I think he's better in man coverage, but I still think he's a plus in both phases. And again, like I said, just really good ball skills. Always seems to be around the football. He's already got 2 defensive touchdowns this year. Just a really, really exciting player to watch. And Detroit's cornerback room has not been great. Terrion Arnold was a first-round pick that hasn't necessarily panned out so far. And DJ Reed is a nice player, but as he approaches his 30s, and he also is a smaller player, definitely got to start thinking about the future there, especially at outside corner for the Lions. Moving on to 24th overall, the Seattle Seahawks are going to go back to the offensive line well for the second straight draft in the first round, and it is going to be Brian Parker out of Duke. He's listed as a tackle. He's going to be an interior offensive lineman at the next level, probably a center. And this is another guy that's kind of blown me away. Definitely a my guy so far in this draft. Again, like I said, plays right tackle for Duke. but definitely going to move to the interior at the next level. Seattle's interior, outside of Gray Zabel, who they picked in the first round last year, has been rough. And whether Brian Parker plays center or right guard, he would be a slam dunk pick. Pair that with Zabel, and you've got two really good interior offensive linemen for the next 10 years. Um, but Parker is athletic. He's strong for his size. He's still only 305 pounds, so he could add some weight to that frame. Doesn't have the length, which is why he's moving inside at the next level. Um, but just understands blocking schemes well, plays with good leverage, isn't out of position, doesn't allow defenders to get into his chest and extend on him, even with the lack of length. Will just be a rock solid selection here for Seattle. Continue to build up that offensive line, and at this point, keep Sam Darnold clean. He's been awesome so far this year, so he looks like the guy moving forward, definitely for Seattle. So continue to just keep him clean in the pocket. Next up, with a surprise team so far this season, it's the New England Patriots, and we're going to give Drake May another weapon. Denzel Boston, the receiver out of Washington. New England's receiver room has actually been quite a surprise so far. You got Stephon Diggs, you've got Kayshon Boutte, you've got Mac Hollins, who has made some plays even at the late stages he's at in his career. You've got the Mario Douglas making plays. But I think they need that true X receiver that can separate. Mac Hollins is an X receiver size, but he can't separate. And that's not to say that Denzel Boston is some crazy athlete. He's not. He's probably a maybe a mid 4.5s guy, but just continually creates separation, knows how to stack a defensive back. And Stephon Diggs is on the wrong side of 30. He's shown a lot of athletic juice this year, especially coming off the ACL injury, but still probably not a guy you're betting on long term. And I think Denzel Boston pairing him with Drake May for the long term would be an excellent selection here for New England. The Chargers are next up at 26th, and I have them going with Clemson edge rusher TJ Parker. I mentioned earlier how Clemson's disappointment hasn't been due to Peter Woods. I think it has been a little bit due to Parker. He has fallen a lot for me. And I'm still betting on the high-end flashes that you see. Really powerful rusher when he's right. But lacks the bend that you would typically look for. Isn't the greatest athlete. He's not a bad athlete, but isn't like a fireball off the edge or anything like that. And it's kind of been a weird season for him so far. So still betting on some of the high upside reps that I've seen from him, and pairing him with Tuli Tuipulotu and Khalil Mack as Khalil Mack approaches the end of his career as well. If he hits, then that would be a fantastic edge room to move forward with. But hopefully he continues to or gets back to where he was last year at some point, because it has been a little disappointing to see him regress this year. So hopefully he can get back on track. Still betting on the high-end reps that I've seen from TJ Parker. The San Francisco 49ers are up next at 27th overall, and they need interior defensive line help. Really, with all the injuries that they have, they need help at a lot of places, but if Caleb Banks was healthy, this would be the pick here. Well, probably it wouldn't, because he would be way off the board by now. He would have been picked way earlier than this for me. But since he's out for the year with that foot fracture, I believe it's a foot fracture, we're going to go with Kristen Miller, the defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman out of Georgia. Miller is an interesting player because he's had to play a lot of one tech and nose tackle for Georgia, but he's not a nose tackle type frame. He's 6'4", about 305, 310 pounds. But just an explosive athlete, plays with really powerful hands. I think he's a better run defender than pass rusher right now, but man, are the pass rush reps that hit, they're high. They're very high end when they hit. And the interior of that defensive line for San Francisco is just, it's not very talented. They did draft Alfred Collins and C.J. West in this past draft, two guys who I was higher on than consensus. But I still think you've got to get a guy that's got more athletic juice in that room. And hopefully he doesn't catch the 49ers luck and be an injured player as often as a lot of those San Fran guys are. Um, but I think it's got to be interior defensive line here for the 49ers as it stands right now. And I think Christian Miller would be a great pick here. Next up, the Eagles are on the clock, and they have got to get a pass rusher. They have really, really struggled to get to the quarterback so far this year. And I'm going to take Tennessee edge rusher Joshua Joseph. Joseph has been a guy that has really surprised me in 2025 so far. Of course, you had James Pierce there last year. They were in the same recruiting class, so they've always been kind of competing for playing time at Tennessee. And Pierce broke out his sophomore year and then was great last year as well, and turned himself into a first-round pick. And Joshua Joseph's going, and now as a senior, has kind of done the same thing. Um, and It's just like every week you see him make a game-changing play, it seems like. In the Georgia game, he had a strip sack that should have won the game for Tennessee. He had a scoop and score against Mississippi State that turned the tide in that game for Tennessee. He had a strip sack that ended up winning the game for Tennessee against Arkansas. So just every week he seems to be making a game-changing play. He's got insanely long arms, reportedly a verified measurement of just under 35-inch arms, which is ridiculous for his frame. I believe he's 6'3", 240 pounds. So definitely a lighter player, but brings it in the run game, especially for that size, uses that length to his advantage. He's a twitchy athlete off the edge. Even especially in the Arkansas tape, you see him tracking down Taylon Green, which is very, very impressive. And just plays with his hair on fire. He's a great leader, great character off the field guy. I know as a Tennessee guy, and just really excited to see as he continues to improve. I think he would be a great addition to that Philadelphia edge room. Next up with the Dallas Cowboys at 29th overall, this is the pick from the Micah Parsons trade. Still, may end up being one of the worst trades in NFL history, depending on how these first round picks shake out for Dallas that they got back. But I think it's probably going to be pretty similar to the AJ Brown trade with the Titans. We'll see though in the future. But since we went safety early, I think you got to go edge rusher here. And I really, really like Cassius Howell out of Texas A&M. He's a bit of an anomaly because he's probably going to have the shortest arms maybe ever for an edge rusher. I believe he's right at 30-inch arms. But it doesn't really seem to affect him, especially against SEC competition. He is lighting it up, not just with the sacks, but also with the pressures, affecting the quarterback. He's got maybe the quickest spin move I've seen. I know Dwight Freeney was a guy that was so famous for that in the 2000s when I was, before I started watching football. I was probably around 5 years old when Dwight Freeney was still playing. But Cassius Howell kind of does the same thing in that spin move where if you blink, he's already by you. He can do it inside. He can do it outside. It looks like he's repped it a million times, which he probably has. But that was his calling card last year, and it's still a calling card for him this year, but he's added so much more to his game. He's become such a better run defender so far this year, and just brings it effort-wise as well, which I always love to see. I think that would be at least a decent pick moving forward for the Cowboys. You compare him with Donovan Ezaraku, who's a rookie this year for Dallas in the edge room, and hopefully you can get a lot of production out of that tandem moving forward. Next up with the Steelers at pick 30, I'm going to believe that Aaron Rodgers is going to retire when I see it, so I'm going to get him another weapon here, and that's going to be Chris Brazzell, the receiver out of Tennessee. Chris Brazzell has been insanely impressive in 2025 so far, especially just burst onto the scene against Georgia, had 170-something yards and 3 touchdowns. And has continued to just show more and more to his game. At 6'5", 200 pounds, he's probably a mid 4.4s guy. I'd guess maybe 4.45, 4.46 in the 40-yard dash. But able to stack defensive backs well, wins vertically, can separate. Even is pretty proficient at breaking outside towards the sideline on out-breaking routes. and does it pretty efficiently, especially for a longer limbed guy like him. Not necessarily the quickest acceleration, which you tend to see from more of these longer limbed receivers, um, but is dominant at the catch point, fights through contact well, is pretty savvy as well at drawing pass interference calls, as well as positioning himself for not necessarily offensive pass interference calls, but maybe where there's a hand fighting between him and the defensive back, and he just subtly gives a little shoulder or one hand to create just a little bit of separation to make the catch, but has shown so much more to his game than he did last year. Really, really excited to see how he continues to develop as the season goes on. And I think this would be it's kind of it may be to some a redundant pick with the verticality and size of DK Metcalf, but I don't think you can go wrong pairing those two together. All right, at 31st overall, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they need edge help here. I would go Romello Height, the other edge rusher out of Texas Tech. They did hit on the Yaya Diaby pick a couple years ago. He's turned into a really nice player. But you've got Hassan Reddick on a one-year deal who's expiring after this year. And there's not a whole lot else in that edge room to speak of. And Romello Height, I get it. He's probably 225 pounds soaking wet and isn't going to be much of a factor against the run. But he's an absolute lightning strike off the edge, just a fireball, just relentless off the edge. Has so many moves. He's so athletic. It's like I can imagine as an offensive tackle, you get into your pass set and he's already by you. It's terrifying to see that type of juice coming off the edge. Really bendy player, flexible, plays with good hand technique as a pass rusher. And honestly, the more and more I see drafting, I like edge rushers that can defend the run. But if you can get after the passer, you're going to go high in the draft, which I totally understand. Because you have to be able to affect the quarterback in this league, even though some teams are transitioning more to that run first mentality. But pairing him with Yaya Diaby, who is that more big body type edge, you can have Romello Height as your more speed oriented guy. I think would be an excellent selection here for the Buccaneers. Now rounding out with maybe the most surprising positively speaking team in the NFL, and that is in the Indianapolis Colts here at 32nd overall. I chose to go with a corner here. It's going to be Keith Abney II out of Arizona State, and it's going to load our full draft board there. But Keith Abney was a guy that I was really high on in the summer. Had him going in the first round in the preseason mock draft. Doesn't have necessarily the measurables you may look for in an outside corner, but he can absolutely play outside corner. He uses the size that he has well, his length, his ability to stay in phase, his hand technique on the line of scrimmage, his fluidity in the hips to be able to stick with receivers in man coverage, as well as his IQ in zone coverage to be able to pass routes off and bait the quarterback. And just always gets his hands on the football. And he's just a really, really consistent football player. You compare him on the outside with Travarius Ward, and then you've got Kenny Moore there, who's a slot corner, who's getting up there in age, but still a nice, productive player. And you probably have one of the best corner trios in the NFL. All right, that does it for Mock Draft 2.0 for the 2026 NFL Draft. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure, again, if you enjoyed it, go down below, drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel. We'll continue to bring you draft content as the draft cycle goes, so stay tuned for all of our new content, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks again for watching.